The house was quiet, almost eerily so. It had been for weeks. I had always been the one to fill the silence with noise, jokes, questions, trying to pull my wife into conversations, into our life. But lately, it had felt like I was the only one trying to keep the wheels of our marriage spinning. And now, there I was, sitting alone at the kitchen table, the morning sun filtering through the blinds, and something clicked. I wasn't in my own home anymore. I mean, sure, I was physically in my house, but the reality hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been a stranger to my own life for the past few months. Not a stranger in the way someone might feel new or out of place, but a stranger in the sense that nothing I did, said, or felt seemed to matter to the one person I thought would always care. It all started when she stopped making coffee in the mornings. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd always made us both coffee, a small ritual that had marked the start of our day. I would take mine with a splash of milk. She'd take hers black, no sugar. For years, it was our routine, the one thing that kept us grounded, despite everything. But then one day, she didn't make the coffee. I remember standing in the kitchen, looking at the empty coffee maker, wondering if she had forgotten or just decided not to today. I shrugged it off. It's not like we needed coffee to have a successful morning, right? But then it happened again the next day. And the day after that, I started making my own coffee. I didn't say anything about it. The silence was enough. It was like we were both silently acknowledging that we had lost the ability to share even the smallest, simplest things. She never offered to make it for me. She never asked if I wanted some. I was just left there, wondering if we had drifted so far apart that even coffee wasn't worth the effort anymore. And then came the night it all fell apart. I had been sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when she walked in, her eyes glued to the screen of hers. It was the same routine. She was always on her phone now, even when she was home. There was a time when we used to talk about everything. What had happened in our day, funny things that happened at work, plans for the weekend. Now, it was just silence between us, punctuated only by the sound of her fingers tapping against the glass of her phone. I thought, maybe this was my chance. Maybe if I just spoke up, maybe if I just tried once more, she'd snap out of whatever funk she was in, and we'd find each other again. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to sound casual, but there was a shakiness in my voice I couldn't hide. "You're home early. Want to talk?" She didn't even look up. "Maybe later. I'm really tired tonight." Her response stung, but it wasn't the first time I'd heard it. She was always tired, always had something else on her mind, always had an excuse for why we couldn't connect. But something about tonight was different. The words she said cut deeper than usual. They were dismissive, as if I was no longer worth the effort. "I'm just tired of this, Russell," she said, finally putting her phone down, but not looking at me. "I'm tired of pretending things are okay when they're not." I froze. I didn't know what she meant. Pretending? Things were fine. Sure, they weren't perfect, but whose marriage ever was? "What do you mean? What's going on? We're fine, right?" Her eyes met mine, but there was nothing in them. Nothing that resembled the warmth or care I had once seen. It was as if she was already somewhere else, mentally and emotionally. "I don't know, Russell," she said with a shrug. "I just don't feel like I'm here anymore. I've tried, I really have, but I don't think I can keep pretending like everything's fine." I didn't know how to respond to that. There was a sinking feeling in my stomach, a sense of dread I couldn't shake. "What does that mean? You don't want to be here?" She exhaled deeply. "I don't want to hurt you, but yeah, I think I'm done." Her words hung in the air, heavier than I could ever have imagined. Done? How could she be done? We had built everything together. The house, the life, the plans for the future. How could she just give up? "I don't love you the way I used to," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. It's not you, it's me." I didn't hear the rest of her words. I didn't want to. I couldn't even process what she was saying. She stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me there, frozen on the couch. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there in the silence, trying to understand what had just happened. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, but at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to cry. I couldn't bring myself to feel anything except the cold emptiness of knowing that the woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around, had already checked out. I wasn't even worth the fight anymore. And so I sat there, staring at the place where she had been, wondering how everything could have fallen apart so quickly, so quietly, until I realized. It wasn't sudden. It had been happening for a long time. And the worst part was, I had been blind to it. The next few days were a blur. I was stuck in a haze of confusion, anger, and disbelief. Everything seemed so surreal. I'd never thought that we, Sarah and I, could ever be this broken. People always talk about couples drifting apart, but I never thought it would happen to us. We were different, I thought. We had something special. But now, as I walked around the house, I realized that the silence between us had become more than just a lull in conversation. It had become a physical presence in the room. It was like we were strangers living under the same roof. I kept thinking back to the night she had told me she was done. What did that even mean? How had we gotten here? I tried to convince myself that maybe it was just a bad night, just a phase, that maybe in the morning, things would feel better. But they didn't. The next morning, when I woke up, Sarah was already gone. She had left for work early, as she always did, but this time it felt different. She didn't even say goodbye. She didn't kiss me on the cheek like she used to, or even offer a quick hug. It was as if she had already made her mind up about us. And what hurt the most was the fact that I hadn't even seen it coming. I spent the day walking around the house, trying to figure out what had changed. I cleaned the kitchen, did the laundry, and went through the motions like everything was fine. But everything was far from fine. I couldn't help but think about what Sarah had said, about how she didn't feel the same anymore. It kept echoing in my mind. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head. Maybe if I just walked through the neighborhood, I could work out some of the emotions that had been building up inside me. As I walked, I noticed couples passing by, laughing and talking. It made me sick to my stomach. How could they be so happy while I was stuck in this emotional wreckage? It was like the universe was mocking me, showing me what I had lost, what I had failed to protect. I thought about the first few years of our marriage. Those were the good times. The times when we couldn't wait to see each other at the end of the day. The times when we were a team, supporting each other through thick and thin. I remember the first time we moved into this house. We spent hours decorating it together, picking out paint colors, arguing over furniture choices. It felt like we were building our future. And now, I was standing in the middle of our neighborhood, feeling like that future had been ripped out from under me. When I returned home, the house felt emptier than it had before. I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a bottle of water. I sat down at the table, trying to calm my racing thoughts. But before I could even take a sip, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a second, I wondered if it was Sarah coming home early. Maybe she was going to apologize, tell me that everything was going to be okay. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Sarah. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Jacobs, holding an envelope. "Hi, Russell," she said, her voice kind. "I found this in my mailbox. It's addressed to you." I took the envelope from her, confused. I hadn't expected any mail, especially not from anyone I knew. As I closed the door, I turned the envelope over and saw the return address. It was from Sarah's office. I didn't know what to expect, but something told me it wasn't good. I sat back down at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out a letter. At first, I thought it might be work-related, some paperwork that had been misplaced, but as I read the first few lines, I felt my heart drop into my stomach. It was a letter from Sarah's HR department. Apparently, Sarah had filed for an official transfer at work. She had requested to move to a different department. But it wasn't just that. The letter went on to explain that she had also requested to work on a different project, one that would require her to spend significantly more time with a new colleague. A colleague who I had never met, but who had been mentioned by Sarah in passing a few times. I stared at the letter for a long time, the words blurring as my vision filled with anger. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me again. So this is what she meant when she said she was done. She wasn't just talking about our relationship. She was making changes in every part of her life. I didn't know what to do with this information. It was like she was slipping further and further away from me, piece by piece, until nothing was left. She had made plans without telling me, without even considering how it would affect me. I wondered if she had already made up her mind about leaving, about walking away from everything we had built. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I had to confront her. I had to know the truth. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. That night, when Sarah came home, I had already decided. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to make the next move. I had to ask her directly. I needed answers. And I needed them now. When she walked in the door, I stood up from the couch and looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah, I said, my voice trembling slightly. We need to talk. She stopped in her tracks, her face blank. About what? About this, I said, holding up the letter. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Then, she sighed. Russell, I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to get angry. Angry, I repeated, my voice rising. You think I'm angry? No. I'm hurt. I'm confused. I don't even know who you are anymore. She took a step back, as if my words had physically pushed her away. I never wanted it to be like this, she whispered. But I can't keep pretending. I can't keep living a lie. And with that, she turned around and walked away, leaving me standing there, holding the letter that now felt like a final goodbye. The next few days passed like a slow-motion train wreck. Every time I walked past Sarah in the house, it was like she wasn't even there. I could feel her presence, but it was like I was a ghost to her. It was unbearable. She was physically there, but emotionally, she was a million miles away. And it wasn't just the silence anymore. It was the complete lack of care. She didn't even seem to care how I was feeling anymore. She didn't notice when I stayed up late, waiting for a word from her. She didn't care when I went to bed early, trying to sleep away the hurt. It was like she had already let go. The only one left trying to hold on was me. On the fourth night after she had walked away, the weight of it all hit me like a freight train. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just kept replaying everything in my mind. The letter, the blank look in her eyes, the way she had walked away from me without saying another word. I had always believed that if you loved someone enough, you could work through anything. But this wasn't something I could work through. The space between us had already grown too wide. She had already started making her escape, and I was the last to know. I couldn't just sit in that house anymore. I had to see her. I had to talk to her, face to face. No more letters, no more games. I needed to hear the truth from her. All of it. The next morning, I waited until she left for work. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her walk away without knowing how I felt. I grabbed my jacket, got in the car, and drove to her office. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I knew it was risky. I knew it could end badly. But I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I had to confront her. When I walked into the building, I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I had to do it. I couldn't keep waiting for her to make the first move. I asked the receptionist where her office was and was directed to the back. I knocked on the door, hesitating for just a moment. But then I heard her voice from the inside. Come in. I opened the door and saw her sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen. She looked up when I entered, her expression unreadable. I could feel the tension in the room immediately. It was like everything I had been holding in for the past few days was about to spill out. Sarah, I said, my voice tight. We need to talk. Now. She stood up slowly, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing here, Russell? You know I'm at work. I know, I said, taking a step forward, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's clearly not. We need to talk about what's going on with us. She took a deep breath, running a hand through her hair. I don't know what you want me to say. I've already told you. I'm done. I can't keep living like this. It's not fair to either of us. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I felt my stomach twist. So that's it. You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through? Sarah's face softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it with an impassive expression. It's not that simple, Russell. I didn't just wake up one day and decide I was done. This has been building for months. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep pretending. I can't live in a relationship where I feel suffocated, where I feel like I'm the only one trying. I shook my head, the words stinging in a way that I couldn't explain. You don't get it, Sarah? I tried. I tried so hard to make this work, to make us work. But you just shut me out. You stopped caring. She looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness, but also with a certain level of resignation. I didn't stop caring, Russell. I just stopped being in love with you. There's a difference. Her words cut deeper than any sharp object ever could. I stood there, speechless, trying to wrap my mind around what she was saying. My chest felt tight, like there wasn't enough air in the room. I wanted to scream, to shout, to ask her how this had happened. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at her, hoping that somehow, this was all just a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. I could see it in her eyes. She had made up her mind. She was already gone. I don't want to hurt you anymore, she whispered, taking a step back. This is what's best for both of us. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even think straight. It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I was standing there, looking at the woman I had loved for so long. And yet, somehow, she wasn't the same person anymore. You're really leaving, aren't you? I asked, my voice cracking. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling slightly. I don't want to, but I have to. I have to do this for myself. I've been holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. I stood there for a moment, just staring at her. My heart felt like it was breaking, piece by piece, but I couldn't do anything about it. She had already made her decision, and I was the last to know. I guess I don't have a choice, do I? I muttered, more to myself than to her. Sarah didn't say anything else. She just turned away and sat back down at her desk, picking up her phone and checking her messages as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a few more seconds, feeling like I was suffocating. And then, without another word, I turned and left her office, walking out of the building into the cold, empty street. I didn't know what came next. All I knew was that I had just lost the one person I had thought I could never lose. The next few days felt like I was walking through thick fog, every step uncertain, every thought clouded with doubt. I had never imagined it would come to this, a life without Sarah. It wasn't just the loss of our marriage, it was the loss of who I thought I was. She had been my world, my anchor, the one constant I could rely on. And now, I was adrift in a sea of emptiness. The moment I walked out of her office, it hit me with a finality I wasn't ready for. I thought I had prepared myself for the worst, but nothing prepares you for the moment when everything you thought was solid crumbles beneath you. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream and shout at her for doing this to us. But I couldn't. I just couldn't bring myself to hate her. Even now, as I sit here writing this, I don't hate her. I can't. But I can't forgive her either. When I got home, the house felt even emptier than it had before. The silence was deafening. Every room seemed to echo with memories of a time when it was filled with laughter, with conversation, with love. Now it was just vacant. I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a beer, my hands trembling. I hadn't had a drink in a while, but right now, it felt like the only thing that could numb the pain. The cold bottle in my hand was a temporary distraction, but even as I took a long swig, I knew it wouldn't fix what had been broken. I tried to occupy myself with anything that would keep my mind from spiraling. I went for a run, thinking that maybe the physical exertion would help clear my head. But it didn't. I kept thinking about Sarah, about everything we had built together, and how quickly it had all fallen apart. It didn't seem real. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting at her desk, so calm, so detached, telling me that she didn't love me anymore. The words kept playing on a loop in my mind, like a broken record. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching it. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from her, some sign that maybe, just maybe, she'd had a change of heart. But no messages came. No phone calls. Just silence. And then, there it was. A message from her. It had been a couple of days since our last conversation, and I wasn't sure if I should open it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the notification. Russell, it began. I know we're both going through a lot right now, and I don't want to make this harder for you. But I think it's time we talk about what comes next. I don't want this to be ugly. I don't want us to hate each other. We need to figure out how to move forward. I stared at the words on the screen. Part of me wanted to scream. Move forward? How could she even think that? We were married. We had a life together. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, wanted to understand. I wanted to know what she had been thinking, what had led to this decision. I thought about responding, but I didn't. I couldn't find the right words. Instead, I put the phone down and lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. There was no guidebook for this kind of pain. No instructions on how to cope with losing someone who was once your everything. The next few days were a blur of missed opportunities, uncomfortable silences, and lingering questions. I spent most of my time in the house, avoiding people, avoiding the world. I didn't want to go out, didn't want to face the reality of what had happened. But life didn't wait. Things moved on, even when you felt like you were stuck in place. I found myself going to the grocery store one day, just to get out of the house, and as I stood in the produce aisle, I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a couple, standing next to each other, laughing and picking out vegetables. I couldn't hear their conversation, but it didn't matter. The way they looked at each other, the way they smiled, it hit me like a ton of bricks. That was what I had once had. That was what I had once been a part of. And now, I was on the outside, looking in. As I walked through the store, pushing my cart aimlessly, I thought about what Sarah had said in her message. We need to figure out how to move forward. How do you move forward from this? How do you pick up the pieces of a life that has been shattered? How do you rebuild something when you don't even know where to start? I was lost. I had no idea what to do next. And that feeling of being lost, of not knowing what the future held, was both terrifying and comforting. Because, in a way, it meant I was free. Free from the weight of trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Free from the need to keep fighting for a love that had already faded. But then, as I was standing in the checkout line, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. This time, I opened it immediately. I'm sorry, Russell. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've just been so confused. I don't know what I want, but I know I can't keep going like this. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Was she really confused? Was this some kind of test? Was she second-guessing her decision? Or was this just another way for her to distance herself from me without facing the consequences of her actions? I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to talk. But deep down, I knew something had changed. She was reaching out. And that was the first step. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The days that followed felt like they were moving in slow motion. I couldn't seem to shake the feeling that something was about to change, but I wasn't sure what it would be. The messages from Sarah kept coming, each one more confusing than the last. She would apologize, express regret, and then, in the same breath, reaffirm her decision to move on. One minute she sounded like she wanted to repair what had been broken, and the next, she was cold and distant again. I couldn't figure out if she was reaching out because she was truly conflicted or if she was just trying to ease her own guilt. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep playing this game. I couldn't keep waiting for her to make the first move. I couldn't keep hoping that one of these messages would be the one where she finally said, "Let's try again." So, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I stopped waiting for her to reach out to me. I stopped answering her messages, stopped reading her texts. It wasn't a decision made out of spite, but out of a need for self-preservation. I had to let go, even if it was just for my own sanity. It wasn't easy. Every time my phone buzzed, I found myself glancing at it, hoping for some kind of miracle. But I resisted. For once, I took control of my own life. I didn't need her to validate me anymore. I didn't need her to tell me that everything was going to be okay. The truth was, I had already spent too long trying to convince myself that things could go back to the way they were. I tried to keep busy, focusing on work, spending time with friends. I even started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in months. But despite all the distractions, there was still a hole inside me, a nagging emptiness that I couldn't shake. I thought I had been prepared for the loneliness, for the heartbreak, but nothing prepared me for how deeply it cut. And then, one evening, as I was walking back to my apartment from the gym, I saw her. Sarah. She was standing on the corner, waiting for someone. She didn't see me at first. Her back was turned, and I was still a good distance away. But something inside me, something I couldn't control, made me stop. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the hope that she would turn around, that she would see me and smile, as though nothing had changed. Maybe I was just desperate to see her face again, to hear her voice. But when she turned around and saw me standing there, her expression was unreadable. Her face was neutral, but I could see the flicker of surprise in her eyes. She hadn't expected to run into me. Not here, not now. "Russell," she said softly, her voice almost too quiet. She didn't come any closer, didn't even make an attempt to cross the street. She just stood there, watching me, waiting for me to say something. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, or if I even had the right to say anything. But I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. "Sarah," I said, my voice strained. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "I was waiting for a friend. I didn't expect to see you." There was something off about her words. She wasn't being completely honest with me. I could feel it in the air between us. The words we hadn't said, the things left unspoken, hung in the space around us like a heavy fog. "I don't know what to say to you anymore," I admitted, the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. "I've been trying to move on, but I don't know how to let go of everything we had." Sarah looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge whether or not I was still the person she once knew. I don't know how to let go either, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. But I can't keep pretending that things are the way they used to be. I can't keep lying to myself, Russell. I never wanted to hurt you, she continued, her eyes filling with tears. I never wanted any of this. But we've changed. We're different now, and I don't know how to go back. I felt the sting of her words, and it hurt more than I ever expected. Not because I hadn't known it deep down, but because hearing it from her, hearing her admit it out loud, made it all too real. We can't go back, I said quietly, the truth settling in like an uninvited guest. I've been trying to fix something that's already broken. We stood there for a long time, just looking at each other. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic proclamations. It was just two people who had once been in love, standing in the cold, facing the painful reality that it was over. Goodbye, Russell, Sarah said softly, before turning away and walking down the street. I watched her leave, my heart heavy in my chest. It wasn't a grand farewell. It wasn't a clean break. It was just an ending. An ending that I never saw coming, but one that had been inevitable all along. I stood there for a long time, letting the cold air bite at my skin, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to chase after her. I didn't feel the need to beg for her to come back. I knew, in that moment, that I had to let her go. The days after Sarah left felt like an eternity, like time itself had slowed down in some cruel form of punishment. I kept telling myself that I was fine, that I could handle this, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. Every minute, every hour spent in that apartment without her, without our life, felt like I was drowning in silence. I hadn't spoken to her since that night on the street. She hadn't reached out, and I hadn't dared to contact her either. It felt like we were both stuck in some weird limbo. Neither one of us willing to fully walk away, but neither of us willing to come back. I threw myself into my work, hoping that would somehow fill the void she left behind. I even started going out more, spending time with friends, pretending like I was okay, trying to convince myself that I could handle the emptiness. But nothing worked. Every time I came home, I'd sit in the living room and stare at the empty space where she used to be, where we used to be. I couldn't escape the constant reminder of what was lost. Then, one evening, as I was about to settle in for another lonely night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my pulse quickening. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew this could be the turning point. Could she be reaching out? Had she had a change of heart? I opened the message, my hands trembling. I know this might sound strange, but I've been thinking about us a lot lately. I don't know what I want, but I know that I miss you. I miss the way things were. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I read the message again, wondering if I was reading too much into it. Could it be that she was regretting her decision? Was she just confused, like she had been before? For a moment, I wanted to reach out, to respond, to ask her what all of this meant. But then, a wave of doubt hit me. Had she really changed? Or was this just another emotional push and pull, a game of cat and mouse? I couldn't do this again. I couldn't put myself through the uncertainty and the hurt. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, trying to figure out the best course of action. Part of me wanted to tell her that I missed her too, that I was ready to try again, but I wasn't sure if I could go through with it. The trust was broken, and no amount of longing could fix that. I put the phone down, letting out a deep breath. I knew that if I responded, it would open up old wounds, ones that were still fresh, still raw, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. The next morning, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head, to stop obsessing over the message and what it might mean. I headed to the park, hoping that some fresh air would help me think. As I walked through the park, I watched couples walking together, laughing, sharing moments that I would never get back. I felt a pang of jealousy, a bitterness I couldn't shake. How was it that everyone else seemed to have it together, while I was left picking up the shattered pieces of my life? I sat on a bench for a while, just staring at the ducks swimming in the pond. The stillness of the water mirrored my thoughts. Everything had once been so clear, so easy. And now I was lost, drowning in confusion and doubt. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could ever go back to the way things were. As I sat there, lost in my own thoughts, I saw someone in the distance. At first, I didn't recognize her, but then the realization hit me. It was Sarah. She was standing near the edge of the park, her back to me, staring at the water. I couldn't breathe. My heart started pounding in my chest. Was she here to talk to me? Was she finally going to tell me the truth about what was going on in her head? I didn't know if I was ready for it, but I knew I couldn't just sit here and watch her walk away without knowing what she wanted. I stood up, my legs feeling weak beneath me as I walked toward her. I stopped just a few feet away, not sure what to say. She didn't hear me at first, but when she turned around, our eyes locked. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. And then, she took a deep breath, her expression softening. "I didn't know if I should come," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about everything about us. I don't know what I want, but I feel like I owe you an explanation." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. An explanation? Was this really happening? After all this time, after everything that had happened, she was finally going to tell me the truth? I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to demand answers for the way she had treated me. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, still cared, just wanted to hear her side, to understand why she had made the choices she had. "I don't know what I'm doing, Russell," she said, her voice shaky now. "I don't know what I want, but I know I've hurt you, and I don't want to hurt you anymore. I don't know if I can fix things, but I need to tell you what's been going on in my head." I stood there, staring at her, not sure what to expect. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with a million different thoughts. Could this be the moment where everything changed? Or was it just another false hope? I waited, holding my breath, for her to continue. Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel, relief that she was finally speaking, or anger that it had taken this long. She stood there, shifting nervously on her feet, avoiding eye contact as if the weight of her own words was too much for her to carry. I could see the vulnerability in her, the same vulnerability that used to draw me to her, but now it felt like a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. "I didn't want to hurt you, Russell," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I really didn't. But I got so caught up in my own head, in what I thought was best for me, that I never stopped to think about what you were going through. I took you for granted." I was silent for a moment, processing everything. The pain, the confusion, the overwhelming sense of betrayal that had become a constant companion over the past few months. But beneath all of that, I felt something else, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. The desire to understand her, to hear her out. "I don't even know where to start," Sarah continued, her voice trembling. "You've been asking for answers, and I've been shutting you out. I guess I didn't want to face the truth. I didn't want to admit that I was the one who had changed." Her eyes finally met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something real in them. Pain, regret, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. But what was that hope for? Us, or just for herself? "You stopped loving me, didn't you?" I said quietly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "You stopped loving me long before you left, didn't you?" She looked down, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of my question was too much for her. "I don't know," she said, shaking her head slowly. "I don't know when it happened, Russell. It wasn't a choice. It just happened. I guess I thought I could ignore it, that I could push through it. But eventually, I realized I was lying to myself." Her confession stung more than I had expected. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the realization that I had been living in a fantasy. I had convinced myself that if I just tried hard enough, if I just worked harder at being the husband she needed, I could make everything right again. But I couldn't. Not if she had already given up on us in her heart. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Russell. I never wanted to hurt you. You're a good man. You deserve someone who can love you the way you deserve. And I couldn't do that for you anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wanted to say something, anything, to express the pain that had been building inside me for months. But all I could do was nod, because what else was there to say? The truth had been laid bare. Our love had faded, and there was no fixing it. There was no magic word that would bring it back. For a long moment, we just stood there, the air thick with unsaid words. My heart was heavy, but part of me felt a strange sense of peace. At least now I knew. At least now, the uncertainty had been replaced with a painful clarity. I was no longer hanging on to something that wasn't there. "I guess this is it, then," I said softly, the weight of finality settling in. "I guess we're both just done." Sarah didn't answer right away. She looked at me for a moment, as if searching for something in my eyes, some glimmer of hope. Maybe. But when she spoke again, It was with a quiet resignation. "I think we've both known for a while now," she said. "We were just too scared to admit it." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. "I don't want to hate you, Sarah. I don't want to walk away from this and hate you. I still care about you. I always will. But I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." She nodded, her expression softening. "I don't want that either. I don't want us to end like this, in anger and bitterness. We were good together once. And maybe we can still be friends? Someday. But not now. Not right away." "Yeah," I said quietly, the idea of friendship with her feeling so foreign, so distant, like a far-off dream I could never quite grasp. "Maybe someday." We stood there in the park, in the middle of a world that seemed to be moving forward while we stood still. And despite the painful reality of the situation, I realized something. Maybe this wasn't the end of everything. Maybe it was just the end of us as we once were. But life, my life, was still waiting for me. It was still out there, just beyond the horizon, and I had to find a way to keep moving, even if it meant moving on without her. "I think it's time for both of us to go our separate ways," I said, the words tasting like closure. "I agree," Sarah whispered. "Goodbye, Russell. I hope you find what you're looking for." I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between us. And yet, even as I walked away from her, there was no anger, no bitterness, only a deep, aching sadness, and a quiet hope that one day we could both find peace. The weeks that followed were a blur of adjustment and reflection. It felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted entirely. I moved out of the apartment, taking only what I truly needed, leaving behind the memories of a life I thought would last forever. Every day was a new step toward figuring out who I was without her, without us. The silence that had once felt suffocating became more bearable, more peaceful, though the scars remained. I took small steps, things I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, began spending more time with my family, and rediscovered passions I had put on hold. It wasn't easy, but gradually, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope for the future. Hope for myself. One afternoon, I went to the cafe down the street that I used to visit alone, just to enjoy a cup of coffee and some quiet time. It was one of those rare moments where I was content in my own company, no pressure, no expectation. As I sipped my coffee, a familiar face walked through the door. It was Laura, an old acquaintance from a few years ago. She had been a friend of a friend, someone I hadn't seen in a long time. We had a few casual conversations back then, but nothing more. She smiled when she saw me, and I found myself smiling back without thinking. It was a simple, easy smile, nothing forced. And in that moment, I realized something important. I was ready for the possibility of new connections. "Russell, right?" Laura asked, her voice warm, like no time had passed. "Yeah, that's me," I said, standing up from my table. "Laura, right? Long time no see." We talked for a few minutes, catching up on life, exchanging small talk. But something felt different this time. It wasn't just idle chatter, it was real. There was no pressure, no tension. Just two people talking, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. It felt good. "Well," Laura said, a hint of excitement in her voice, "I'm actually free this weekend. Maybe we could grab a drink and talk more? It'd be nice to catch up properly." I hesitated for a moment, then realized that I wasn't hesitant because of Sarah or the past. I was hesitant because I was ready to move forward, ready to open myself up to something new, something fresh. So, I smiled, this time without any doubt. "Yeah, I'd like that," I replied. "Let's do it." As I left the cafe that day, I felt something inside me shift again. It was as if a door had opened that I didn't even know was there. I had been so consumed by the past, by the pain of losing Sarah, that I hadn't seen the future waiting for me. But now it was clear. The future wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. I knew there would be more hard days ahead. Healing wasn't a straight path, and there were still moments when I thought about Sarah, about what we had lost. But I also knew that life wasn't about clinging to what was gone. It was about moving forward, about learning and growing from the past, and finding joy in the small moments along the way. The road ahead wasn't clear, and maybe it never would be. But for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to walk it, wherever it led. And as I stepped into the unknown, I realized that, while the past would always be a part of me, It didn't define me anymore. This was my new beginning, and I was no longer afraid to see where it would take me.